Hello and welcome to the Rock and Roll Era Lecture. What you'll see on your screen is a long list of artists and accompanying songs by title. I will lose to the copyright gods trying to play each of these songs within the course of this lecture, so it will be imperative that you, the viewer, go pause the video after each track is discussed and give it a quick listen, and then return to the lecture and continue onward, step and repeat. For your sanity and ease, there are two locations where you can find a already built-in playlist that follows this here roadmap. One location is on Spotify. If you search for Jake Spinella, you will find my History of the World According to Music playlist for each of the lectures, but this one is titled Rock and Roll. It will be a public playlist, and you can search there. There is also a Napster playlist, which is similar. A handful of these songs were not available on the Napster playlist, but the artists all discussed here, you can find things by the artists that will be similar. So, with that disclaimer in mind, I will be reminding you after each tune to pause it and go check it out and come on back. Let's rock around the clock, shall we? If you've tuned into previous lectures, you have heard about the direction that jazz was headed following the big band era, how it became a serious art form, and in this particular lecture, we are talking about commercially successful evolutions of music, pop music, if you will, following the big band era, and we're going to end this discussion just before the Beatles invade America. Advances in technology such as jukeboxes, records like 33s and 45s, and the almighty television accelerated the conservatism in consumers' musical tastes. John Philip Sousa's treatise, you may remember him from the Early America lecture, and that treatise where he goes on the tirade about it's the end of days, does not like recorded music, canned music. His treatise was beginning to come to fruition with the invention of the jukebox, because consumers could now listen to any record they wanted to unlimited times. New record technology, 33s, eliminated 78s because of their sheer amount of audio capacity, and the television would forever ruin the social component of music consumption. The discussion we have in focus today begins in the mid-1940s and ends in 1964. This period will include the Korean War and civil rights movement. The civil rights and inequalities that are present will underlie many artists in focus in this particular lecture. We begin with serious versus commercial, quote-unquote, jazz. Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, Thelonious Monk, many other members of the modern jazz movement, also known as bebop, were too far out for non-musician audiences. The dance band and crooner craze of the big band and swing era eliminated jazz's essential ingredients, improvisation and swing. Crooners would undoubtedly change the direction of commercially consumed music to be vocally rather than instrumentally driven. However, big bands continued to survive after World War II with an unlikely addition, the accordion. Accordionist Lawrence Welk had been involved in dance bands since the 1920s. He led a group in the 1930s that played music that was on the lighter side, designed for dancing. On the opposite end of the spectrum were hot jazz bands like Benny Goodman and Duke Ellington. Welk was the jukebox favorite of the 1940s, and his popularity landed him a television show in 1951. The Lawrence Welk Show aired until 1982 and showcased his music, including his biggest hit on the charts, Calcutta, from 1961. Calcutta is pretty corny. When You are going to pause this video and listen to one of the recordings. The recording I suggest, which is on Spotify, is Ain't She Sweet. On Napster, you can find Shame on You, which is a collaboration with Red Foley. Either one of these will feature accordion with some big band. Please pause the video and check that out. Welcome back. Crooners like Vaughn Monroe and Nat King Cole set the stage for the singing style that would define the first half of the 1950s. Though Nat King Cole was an excellent jazz pianist and fond of improvisation, his crooning was incredibly conservative. In 1950, 3 years after he sang the Christmas song, chestnuts roasting on an open fire, the number one song was his rendition of the ballad Mona Lisa. In 1956, Nat King Cole hosted The Nat King Cole Show, but decided to end the show in 1957. Cole continued to have a number of hits until his death in 1965. Please pause the video as you go find Mona Lisa. And you're back and better than ever. Let's talk about some comedians that have a blues tinge. The blues influence played a key role in a number of musical evolutions such as early jazz, boogie woogie, and big bands. The next evolution on our radar is rhythm and blues, R&B for short. Rhythm and blues as a descriptive term became a household term in the 1940s, though pinpointing an exact definition of the classification is a slippery slope. As we will observe, rhythm and blues was slapped on just about anything that moved, which ultimately led to some confusion. When modern performing musicians are asked to play the blues, without hesitation, they assume the structure of the composition will be a set chord progression, only 3 chords, over the course of 12 bars, on loop until the performance is over. The only variables are the improvisations and the composition's melody. All standard blues compositions are contrafacts. There are, of course, variations that require some discussion amongst musicians, such as the 8 or 16 bar forms, as well as some chord substitutions. But most of the time, the 12 bar blues is what is the blues standard. You can follow the 12 bar blues structure, AAB blues form, by tracing your finger around an analog clock face. Every hour, you will move your finger around with every 4 beats that you feel. As you cycle one full pass around the 12 hours on an analog clock, you will have followed one full cycle of the 12-bar blues. Try it out on some of the upcoming recordings. The first rhythm and blues musicians utilized this organizational structure of a set 12-bar blues form in a style dubbed jump blues. Louis Jordan, nicknamed the King of the Jukebox at the end of the swing era, was a saxophonist and a band leader. He was heralded for his comedic vocal skills and stage antics. Louis Jordan and his Timpani Five formed in 1938 and pumped out several comedic jump blues hits such as Caledonia. The group's Ain't That Just Like a Woman is particularly noteworthy because the guitarist Carl Hogan played the guitar riff that would dominate rock and roll. Please go listen to, pause the video now, find Caledonia and Ain't That Just Like a Woman. And you're back. Louis Jordan's colleague, Louis Prima, was a comedic vocalist, trumpet player, composer, and bandleader. Rooted in New Orleans, Prima had been in the music scene since the 1920s. In the late 1930s, he composed Sing, Sing, Sing with a swing, though Benny Goodman was the one that had a hit with that tune. In the 1940s, Prima began revamping Tin Pan Alley tunes with high-energy arrangements and stage antics. Prima was so popular that in 1967, Disney casted him as the voice of King Louie in the animated Jungle Book. Prima remained popular and relevant until his death in 1978. please go listen to Jump, Jive, and Wail from 1956, which will fit the bill for jump blues. Pause and give it a listen. And you're back. We talk about TV now. Early rhythm and blues seems like an underground movement when compared to what was popular, merely because it was shown on TV. Experimental televisions existed as early as the 1920s, but the commercial consumption engine that exists today emerged in the 1950s. The prized living room commodity destroyed the social component of experiencing music long before MTV took over the world. Video would indeed kill the radio star. The music showcased on TV in the 1950s was immensely popular merely because it was on TV. Many crooners of the 1950s were awarded their own television shows where they sang, their special guests sang, and everybody sang together, though all of it was pretty hokey. Vocalists like Perry Como, Nat King Cole, Dinah Shore, and Pat Boone were noteworthy headliners of these types of shows. Go listen to Perry Como's novelty tune, Hot Diggity Dog Ziggity Boom, and then come on back. Though they were not known as musicians, Ed Sullivan, Dick Clark, and Arthur Godfrey all hosted shows that regularly featured relatively unknown performers. The Mcguire Sisters and the Chordettes gained fame after appearing on Arthur Godfrey Time. Both groups carry an Andrews Sisters type of flair, featuring a group of ladies singing in tight harmonies. Please pause the video and listen to the Chordettes sing Mr. Sandman. Back again. With the exception of Godfrey Show, America's racial divide ensued that television prominently featured white artists. Godfrey famously promoted interracial groups such as the Mariners at a time when this was widely considered taboo. The stigma was so strong that groups like the Platters did not even want to appear on TV, fearing that their record sales would take a hit if audiences ever discovered that they were black. After topping the R&B charts, the Platters unwillingly got behind the camera in the 1950s with Only You and You Alone, which made it to number 5 on the charts. Their next song, The Great Pretender, went to number 1. Please pause the video and go listen to the Platters' rendition of The Great Pretender. Music television's, not MTV. Music television's audience began shifting by the early 1960s. The young folks enjoyed the crooners, but also wanted to see what was on Ed Sullivan's show or Dick Clark's show. The older folks preferred something called Sing Along with Mitch, which featured a classical oboe player, Mitch Miller, and his gang. And they sang Tin Pan Alley songs with large font lyrics appearing across the bottom of the screen. While the performances encouraged at-home audience engagement and were highly successful. Sorry, I have a mental image of this. Mitch Miller himself disliked the product being sold. You can look up Mitch Miller and the Gang on YouTube, and there's some video that's presently available where you'll see exactly what I described about that large font and the sing-along. But the audio, we're going to check out The Yellow Rose of Texas, which went to number 2 on the charts. Please go listen to The Yellow Rose of Texas. Wasn't that painful? Okay, let's pelvic thrust, shall we? With the crooning craze maintaining its popularity via television, the R&B movement was evolving into what we now recognize as early rock and roll. Swinging rhythms in the 12-bar blues formula hypnotized youths of the 1950s. Chuck Berry's country-tinged Maybelline went to number 1 on the charts in 1955 and landed him appeal with affluent white audiences. Chuck Berry was notorious for shaking his hips while he performed. This, of course, was taboo. Yet his audiences did not fuss. Chuck Berry had a string of hits after Maybelline, including more R&B-driven tunes like Roll Over Beethoven and Johnny Be Good. Marty McFly did not write the song Johnny Be Good. Please pause your video and go check out Johnny Be Good. Richard Wayne Penniman, better known as rock and roll pianist Little Richard, had two back-to-back hits that went to the top of the charts. Tutti Frutti of 1955 went to number 2, while Long Tall Sally of 1956 went to number 1. Like Chuck Berry, Little Richard appealed to both black and white audiences. The pianist was known for his showmanship, but went a step further than Chuck Berry as far as pelvic motions are concerned. Surprisingly, audiences enjoyed when Little Richard stood while playing, kicked one leg atop the piano, and then would proceed to pelvic thrust. Imagine this as you pause this video and go listen to Tutti Frutti. New Orleans-born pianist Antoine Fats Domino Jr. is one of the tamer pioneers of this genre. He remained seated while he played the piano. Fats Domino is best known for his rock and roll rendition of Blueberry Hill and his composition Ain't That a Shame. Fats Domino is often glossed over, but his piano playing style should be noted that it inspired many artists to come, like a very important group, the Beatles. But onwards, must talk about cowboys. Country music would not make waves on the Billboard charts until the 1960s, but sounds associated with the West and the South were slowly becoming more prominent in popular music through the 1940s and 50s. On par with Mitch Miller's Yellow Rose of Texas, cowboy-themed music was performed by some very unlikely artists. A crooner, trumpet player, and big band leader named Vaughn Monroe sang a song called Ghost Riders in the Sky in 1949. Similarly, Frankie Lane, who was an Italian city boy from Chicago, sang Mule Train, complete with whip cracks. Along with some Western film and television show music, he sang the theme from Rawhide, Gunfight at the OK Corral, and the Mel Brooks classic Blazing Saddles. Even the Western swing group Bill Haley and his Saddlemen, who sang tunes like Yodel Your Blues Away, and Bill Haley yodels on that tune, had a major rock and roll hit. Shortly after they changed their name to Bill Haley and the Comets, their tune Crazy Man Crazy was the first rock and roll song to make it onto the Billboard charts. Please pause the video and check out Crazy Man Crazy. It's also worth mentioning that these cowfolk often seem to reach a higher tier on the ladder than their colleagues with darker skin tints. Even though both were using the same materials, Bill Haley and the Comets had a hit in 1954 with Shake, Rattle, and Roll. Shake, Rattle, and Roll was a cover of Big Joe Turner's tune, Shake, Rattle, and Roll. Pat Boone's cover of Ain't That a Shame was a Fats Domino composition. Pat Boone's version went to number 1 on the charts, while Domino's only made it into the top 10. The story of a more successful white cover of a black original was going to spill over into a bunch of this discussion's popular genres, such as the next one, doo-wop. Doo-wop is a mostly a cappella, meaning without instruments, R&B musical genre that fused barbershop-styled harmonic group singing, the nonsense syllables from scat singing, and Tin Pan Alley chord progressions and form. The style emerged in and around New York City as early as the 1940s, but there is some controversy surrounding the title's origin. We're left with a chicken or the egg type of argument that appears in the form of, was doo-wop a descriptive term for the genre before or after it was first heard on a recording? We're going to let historians debate that and move on to music. During the big band era, the Andrews Sisters were certainly the biggest name in group singing, though their scat singing left room for improvement. Groups like the Mills Brothers, the Ink Spots, and the Delta Rhythm Boys paved the way for doo-wop to evolve by making extensive use of harmonic scat singing in the barbershop style. Please pause the video and listen to the Mills Brothers. Hey, hey, how am I doing? I realized as you came back, I dyslexia that. It's how am I doing? Hey, hey. But you know, you listened to it. Anyway, the first recording that blatantly features the syllables do and wop is a tune called When You Dance from 1955 by the Turbans. As you listen to this one, please note the do's and also the wops. And that before this group and many others in the genre recorded in the studio with instrumental backing, do and wop, why they exist, would have been used in a cappella street performances. Those syllables were to represent imitations of instrument sounds, like the whole scat singing thing. Please pause. Go check out When You Dance. The doo-wop genre shared the conundrum of songs that originated with black groups but reached ultimate success at the hands of white groups. Examples include Shaboom of 1954 by the Chords, which made it to number 2 on the charts, but the white group, the Crew Cuts, when they covered it, it went to number 1. The Penguins had Earth Angel, peaked at number 8. Crew Cuts Strike Again, and their version goes to number 4. The Moonglows made it to number 1 on the charts, hooray, with a tune called Sincerely. But the Mcguire Sisters covered it, and theirs went to number 1 and sold 1 million more copies. Doo-wop was embraced by Italian Americans in New York and New Jersey. Artists such as Dion and the Belmonts, Johnny Maestro and the Cress, ultimately later Johnny Maestro and the Brooklyn Bridge, and the Four Seasons, later Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons, would continue to evolve the genre, influencing artists to come. The Four Seasons will be discussed extensively a little bit later. The music business was beginning to change gears, shifting from sheet music to records. The change was not instantaneous and had some experimentation with various methodologies. One such method was taking a song and recording it in many different genres. The hope was to sell the song to a wide variety of record-consuming audiences. As witnessed in the doo-wop section of this lecture, the tactic worked. Songs like Hank Williams' Cold Cold Heart were recorded by numerous artists in various genres. Before you pause and listen to Hank Williams' version of the original, note that you're going to listen to the same exact song, but a different cover by Tony Bennett, which is more in a crooner style and recorded the same year. There are more examples than just Cold Cold Heart. There was one tune called The Ballad of Davy Crockett, and it's really awful. But from 1954 to 1956, that song landed itself on the top of the Billboard charts 5 different times, and there were over 20 different covers that existed simultaneously in that 2-year period. Please pause the video and check out the 2 versions of Cold Cold Heart. Those were 2 very different versions of the same tune, wouldn't you say? I hope so. A second method involved the packaging of albums. With the shift from 78s to 33s and 45s, 33s seemed to be the best bang for your buck. Packaging for 33s were capable of holding 4 records, but were often only filled with 1. The 3 empty slots created a device that allowed you to travel with 4 of your favorite records. Prior to streaming services, this is how people shared their music. Many consumers were not on board with purchasing empty space, thus they purchased 33s that had all 4 slots filled. So, the best-selling 33s or albums of the era were not those of Elvis Presley and Frank Sinatra and other teen icons, but they were the soundtracks from ballets and musicals. The Sound of Music, West Side Story, and even highlights from Tchaikovsky's Nutcracker had the best record sales, the highest record sales. So that was method 2. Method 3 targeted audiences through exotic, erotic, intellectual, and folkloric appeals. Mood music was advertised in certain adult magazines that tried to convince young men that exotic soundtracks were needed for their bachelor pads. If you want to hear what that sounded like, I recommend you go look up Paul Weston or Les Baxter. They were the two guys in charge of that. The teenage demographic seemingly purchased records with a more erotic appeal than a musical appeal. Why do we say this? The artwork on the albums featured attractive artists, and this album art could be hung on the walls like posters. College folk, they dismissed rock and roll as kids' music, and they much preferred the intellectual appeals of jazz, particularly like Dave Brubeck, and prolific folk music like Pete Seeger. It is Harry Belafonte who is the first artist that successfully combines all of these appeals in this third tactic. He was exotic, erotic, intellectual, and folkloric. Harry Belafonte's Caribbean calypso style changed the game for the record industry. Before you go listen to Jump in the Line, please don't call that tune the Beetlejuice song either. Thank you. You must know that it produced a resultant Latin craze, which had artists incorporating quote-unquote Latin words into their songs. Prime example is Bill Haley's Mambo Rock. Mambo. And this is the ultimate shift away from swing rhythms, the swung divisions of the beat, to straight rhythms, even divisions of the beat. So now, please pause your video and check out Jump in the Line. Rock your body in time. You can hear more of the Latin influence in these straight rhythms if you check out Tequila by the Champs, Louie Louie by Richard Berry, or Richie Valens's La Bamba. But for now, we're going to talk about yet another tactic and go over to the teenagers and the teen idols. As we inch closer to 1960, we turn our attention again towards television. As the music business continued to evolve, the next tactic seemed to be a recipe for success. Budding artists who had received some airplay on the radio were often picked up and featured on American Bandstand or The Ed Sullivan Show. Arthur Godfrey Time kind of went under because he was firing people on air. Yikes. These budding artists had one thing in common: their age. Youthful artists who appeared on television appealed to America's young people. Their shared age and typically attractive appearance morphed these artists from musicians to icons and also heartthrobs. After smoking countless cigarettes and consuming many bottles of Jack Daniels since his last mention in the big band era, Frank Sinatra's voice transformed from crooner to the iconic Old Blue Eyes voice. During the 50s and 60s, Sinatra pumped out a slew of albums and regularly appeared on television and starred in films. Sinatra worked with big names like Count Basie, Quincy Jones, Nelson Riddle, Joe Beam, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., the rest of the Rat Pack, which was named by Humphrey Bogart, by the way. And all the products of all those collaborations are most certainly ubiquitous. Please pause the video and listen to Nelson Riddle's arrangement of Cole Porter's I've Got You Under My Skin, sung by Frank. That was the iconic Frank. Now, Elvis Presley's controversial hip gyrations positively attracted the attention of teenagers, but not their parents. Presley's recording career began in 1953 at Sun Studios, but went to the top of the charts with a hit called Heartbreak Hotel in 1956. The king of rock and roll had a controversial hit with Big Mama Thornton's Hound Dog, a cover of Hound Dog. Appearing on television without his guitar for the first time during his rendition of Hound Dog, he shook his hips, which upset many viewers. Remember how ironic this is when I was talking about Little Richard a few moments ago? Anyway, disc jockey Alan Freed, who coined the term rock and roll, thought Presley was the only white man who could really sing the blues. Please pause the video and check out Heartbreak Hotel. Welcome back. Yes, if you have not seen the Hound Dog video either, I recommend going to check that out. And you can also find Big Mama Thornton's version of Hound Dog, which is very satisfying. Moving on. Though many of these teenage idols were men, here comes a list of names. Frankie Avalon, Paul Anka, Jerry Lee Lewis, Ricky Nelson, the Eisley Brothers, and Bobby Darin. There are two notable chart-topping ladies. Hooray! Connie Francis and Doris Day. Doris Day appeared in a 1956 Alfred Hitchcock flick called The Man Who Knew Too Much, and she sang this song, Que Sera, Sera, throughout the film. The song was introduced in the movie and went to number 2 on the Billboard charts. Similarly, Connie Francis reluctantly recorded a cover of a song called Who's Sorry Now that went to number 4 in 1958. Pause the video and listen to Que Sera, Sera. Come on, baby, let's do the twist. The twist craze begins with the Sensational Nightingales, a gospel group. They did not want to record their secular composition circa 1956, so they passed it on to another group called the Midnighters. They were more in the R&B vein. The Midnighters recorded the twist in 1959, but it went to the B side of a 45. The A side was Teardrops on Your Letter. The twist was a mild success. It made it to number 28 on the charts, but they had another tune called Finger Poppin' Time, which they basically copied and pasted the twist, but changed the lyrics. If you have time to go check out Finger Poppin' Time and you're familiar with the twist, you'll see what I'm talking about. Finger Poppin' Time caught the attention of Dick Clark, the host of American Bandstand. He decided to feature the group, the Midnighters, on the show, and then discovered the twist. But Dick Clark did not have a good experience working with the Midnighters on the show. He still wanted to feature the twist, though. The Midnighters did some controversial stuff in their stage performance, which included the backup singers cross-dressing and not really pantomiming, but acting out the birthing of a child using a doll and dropping it between straddled legs. There's a whole trilogy of songs about Annie having a baby from that group. Pretty fun, silly stuff. Was not cool in 1959. So Dick Clark and his wife discovered a gentleman named Ernest Evans, who he could imitate the sounds of the Midnighters and was also not deemed controversial. Dick Clark's wife, though, decided that he required a stage name and said, Ernest Evans isn't going to work. Your name is now Chubby Checker. And in 1960, Chubby Checker appeared on American Bandstand, singing and also demonstrating how to do the twist. You can do the twist at home as you listen to the version when you pause the video by pretending that you are putting out 2 cigarettes, one with each foot, and you are also coming out of the shower and have a towel and you are scrubbing your back dry. Don't believe me? Go watch the video of Chubby Checker doing the twist, and it'll go something like that. See you in a second. Hopefully you enjoyed the twist, and my description was not far off. The twist took the world by storm, and the majority of recording artists hopped on the train. Chubby Checker was so inspired he recorded a sequel tune called Let's Twist Again. Gary U.S. Bond recorded a virtual copy and paste of Harry Belafonte's tune, Jump in the Line, you remember that, but he covered it and renamed it Twist, Twist, Sonora. A couple different lyrics, but it's the same tune. Other artists contributed to the movement, such as Jimmy Soul. If you have heard the song If You Want to Be Happy for the Rest of Your Life, That's probably his biggest tune, but he's got Twistin' Matilda. Mongo Santa Maria had Panchanga Twist. King Curtis had the Soul Twist. Even Louis Prima recorded Oh When the Saints Go Twistin' In. More examples of the twist being a craze include Sam Cooke's Twistin' the Night Away and the Eisley Brothers' sequel to Shout, Twist and Shout. Other songs, though similar, were overshadowed by the umbrella of the twist. They had ideas for partnerless dancing, Jamaican ska, everybody does the ska, ska, Shout, and Limbo Rock. That's the Jack B. Limbo, Jack B. Quick tune. Partnerless dancing was pretty liberating for women. You don't need to touch anybody. You could go dance with your gal pals. It was a pretty weird existence before this. If you wanted to dance, you had to have a partner. Now you don't have to touch anybody. Yay. Some people don't like to be touched, man. Anyway, we just name dropped a couple soul folks. Let's move over to them. The pioneers of soul. Well, where did that idea of soul come from? Came from Ray Charles and Milt Jackson, who's of the Modern Jazz Quartet. They had a collaborative album called Soul Brothers. Soul made waves in the wake of Harry Belafonte's and the Twisties' success. Artists like Ray Charles, Sam Cooke, and the Eisley Brothers had been relatively unnoticed on the scene, but started to gain popularity. Ray Charles had a hit, Mess Around. It was recorded at Atlantic Records in 1953. Mess Around was based on an old 1930s New Orleans boogie-woogie tune called Cow Cow Blues. If you go check out that one and then Mess Around, they're going to sound real similar. His next hit in 1954, I've Got a Woman, was a reworking of a gospel tune from a group, the Southern Tones, called It Must Be Jesus. Again, if you check out It Must Be Jesus, it's going to sound a whole lot like I've Got a Woman. And if you're not familiar with these Ray tunes, you should check them all out. But the one that I really want you to do, if you're only going to listen to one Ray Charles tune, this is the one I'm sending you to. It's called What I'd Say from 1959. It went to number 6 on the charts, and it's really noteworthy because the tune's recorded in 2 parts, part 1 and part 2, but now on streaming services you can find the whole thing all put together seamlessly. It features a sex scene. What? Yes, a sex scene during the second half. There's this call and response thing, and go give it a listen and you'll see what I'd say. Wasn't that fun? Very controversial. Anyway, Sam Cooke's You Send Me went to number 1 on the charts in 1957. What a great tune. This king of soul, as he became known, pumped out a string of hits between 1957 and 1963 before he was assassinated in 1964. His 1962 Twist Train hit, Twistin' the Night Away, also made it to number 1 on the charts. Another Saturday Night of 1963 breaks the theatrical term the fourth wall and invites the listeners to participate during the final choruses. You can hear Sam say, "Everybody sing," on Another Saturday Night. Go check that out. Sam's music is particularly cool. There's an awesome documentary about the 2 killings of Sam Cooke. One is the musician and one is the icon that he became. He was a really important dude, and unfortunately we can't talk at length about Sam. Would love to give you a whole just hours worth of information on Sam Cooke, but we can't. Go check out some of his catalog. I've listened to most of it multiple times, most all of it multiple times. It's good. He's got some great stuff. We'll talk about some of his colleagues a little bit later. I think of also like Otis Redding, but Otis Redding's a little bit further down the timeline. We'll get to him soon. But the final missing puzzle piece now of the 3 big pioneers of the soul movement, the Eisley Brothers. They have one of the longest and most influential music careers in the business. Shout, from 1959 sold over 1 million copies, which provided the foundation for the fusion of twisting and also shouting on 1962's Twist and Shout. The Beatles did not do that. That's the Eisley Brothers did it first. The group continued to appear in the top 10 of the charts throughout the 1960s and 70s. They had hits that included This Old Heart of Mine, It's Your Thing, and That Lady. The latter career of the Eisley Brothers will be discussed in a different lecture, but for now, check out Shout. A little bit softer now. All right, so you want to know about the birds and the bees? Well, let me tell you, youthful solo female singers were not nearly as plentiful as their male counterparts. However, this changed when groups of young women joined forces together. The rise of girl groups spawned a shift from soloists to bands. Singing in groups was not new or uncommon, a trend we've witnessed in pop genres from barbershop to doo-wop to big band. This particular group setting would remain a powerful force in commercial music for the next several decades. In 1960, the Shirelles peaked at number 39 on the charts with their first single, Tonight's the Night. The New Jersey-based girl group followed with Carole King's Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow? What a great tune, which went all the way to number 1. The Shirelles continued to pop out chart-topping hits between 1960 and 63, such as Mama Said, Dedicated to the One I Love, and Baby It's You. But please pause the video and listen to the entirety of the wonderfulness that is Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow. If that disappointed you, you must have no soul. The Shirelles were not alone on the scene. New York-based groups like the Chantels, the Bobettes, and the Toys also produced chart-topping hits. The Chantels, Maybe, the Bobettes, Mr. Lee. They were both hits in 1957. There's a group in Michigan called the Marvelettes. They reached number 1 on the charts in 1961 with Please Mr. Postman. Again, not a Beatles tune first. Anyway, please pause the video and check out those 3 tracks, Maybe, Mr. Lee, and Please Mr. Postman. Though the Toys had been around since 1961, they didn't make it big until 1965, when they went to number 2 on the charts with A Lover's Concerto. At the hands of Sandy Linzer and Danny Rendell, A Lover's Concerto was a reworking of Johann Sebastian Bach's Minuet in G major from the Baroque era lecture. You might remember it. That tune, perhaps, which is in a 3-beat meter. This team flipped it to a 4-beat meter and incorporates a Motown-style bass line. Please pause the video and go enjoy A Lover's Concerto. So many key changes. I love it. The Chiffons, another New York-based girl group worthy of mention, had a number 1 hit with 1963's He's So Fine, and followed it with a number 5 hit, another Carole King composition, One Fine Day. The group was the first to record It's My Party, but it was not until Leslie Gore collaborated with Quincy Jones that song went to number 1. Leslie Gore had a sequel, revenge-themed song called It's Judy's Turn to Cry, which made it to number 5, as did another tune called She's a Fool. There's a little overarching connective story in between all of that. Leslie Gore's feminist-themed You Don't Own Me held the number 2 slot against the Beatles for 3 weeks in 1963. Go listen to, please, the Chiffons' He's So Fine and Leslie Gore's You Don't Own Me, and then come on back for more. Okay, some extreme bias is about to happen. The Four Seasons, a boy band from New Jersey, was one of the most influential boy bands that emerged in the early 1960s. As a New Jersey native, I'm very biased against them in a positive way. Frankie Valli was the group's lead singer. He shaped the group's iconic sound by singing primarily in his falsetto. Rooted in the Tin Pan Alley, barbershop doo-wop, and jazz traditions, the Four Seasons' first #1 hit was a song called Sherry. Bob Crew, the group's producer, added to their innovative sound by doubling Frankie Valli's voice. The Four Seasons followed Sherry with two more big hits that went to #1, Big Girls Don't Cry and Walk Like a Man. For now, please go listen to Sherry. And you're back. The British invasion of 1964 did not diminish the Four Seasons' success. Ragdoll was written by Bob Gaudio, who wrote those other three hits previously mentioned, went to #1 on the charts. Another tune called Dawn went to #3. The Four Seasons continued to pop out hits that landed them in the top 20 from 1965 through 1968. Just a few of these titles include Let's Hang On, Opus 17, Working My Way Back to You, Don't Think Twice. Don't Think Twice was a cover of a Bob Dylan tune, and those previous three tunes, Let's Hang On, Opus 17, Work My Way Back to You, were all tunes that were worked out by Sandy Linzer and Denny Rendell. Excuse me. If you like the Toys of Lovers Concerto, you will probably also like those three tunes. The Four Seasons also recorded a version of Cole Porter's I've Got You Under My Skin, very different from the Sinatra version, and a big solo number for Frankie Valli called Can't Take My Eyes Off You. The Four Seasons rendition of Carole King's Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow was their last charting hit of the 1960s, but they continued to chart in the 1970s with hits like My Eyes Adored You, Who Loves You, December 1963, and Grease for the movie of the same name, movie musical of the same name. I will also mention that Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow by the Seasons is very different than the Shirelles. Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons remained relevant into the 21st century as they have a biographical Broadway musical called Jersey Boys about them, and also a film based on the musical. Okay, off the pedestal for the Four Seasons as you pause the video and listen to Can't Take My Eyes Off You. Stop. Hey, what's that sound? Not yet. That's a later point in time for those fans of that song. The final tactic of the music business, because we've been talking about the music business for a while now in this lecture, employed involving crossing the streams, never cross the streams, of musical tastes. Producers noted that there were divisions among music consumers. Orchestral music and Broadway soundtracks sold better than anything under the umbrella of R&B. The business decided to combine these sounds from contrasting styles, and the result was a major, major success. First up, the Drifters, a soulful boy band, were first under the broad stroke classification of R&B to use a string orchestra and a triangle. Save the Last Dance for Me of 1960 went to #1 on the charts, while the same year's This Magic Moment listed at #4. Another chart topper featuring strings and triangle was Under the Boardwalk of 1964. Under the Boardwalk does not feature Ben E. King, the group's original lead singer, as he left the group to make it as a soloist in 1960. His solo number, again featuring strings and triangle, Stand By Me, made it to the top 10. Please pause, go find Save the Last Dance for Me and Stand By Me. Bing! Phil Spector's Wall of Sound was a perfect example of the evolution of the orchestral and R&B hybrid. Spector sought to create an overly dense sonic aesthetic, so strong that even if material was not the greatest, the sound would carry the record. The Wall of Sound is not to be confused with distortion, as the result is a well-mixed, enormous sound created by an ensemble of doubled and tripled instruments. Spector's Wagnerian method incorporated an array of instruments, including acoustic and electric pianos, harpsichords, electric and acoustic guitars, strings, brass, woodwinds, percussion, as well as mixing tools like reverb. The Wall of Sound is best heard on Da Doo Ron Ron of 1963 by the Crystals, Be My Baby by the Ronettes, and Wouldn't It Be Nice by the Beach Boys. But please go listen to Da Doo Ron 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 Ron. Hopefully you're back from doing that. The Beach Boys were also part of the surf craze of the 1960s, not to mention being part of the Wall of Sound. The surf craze died during the British invasion, but it produced a lot of material while it lasted. The Beach Boys had several albums packed with surfing-themed tunes such as Surfin' Safari, Surfin' USA, Surfer Girl. The song Fun 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 comes from the group's fifth album, Shut Down Volume 2. It features the infamous guitar lick from Ain't That Just Like a Woman. Other groups hopped on the surf train, notably the Safaris, who went to number 2 on the charts with their mostly instrumental 12-bar blues tune, Wipeout, as well as a group from the landlocked state of Minnesota, the land of 10,000 lakes, the Trashmen. They had the hit Surfin' Bird. It's a goofy tune, which I can no longer unsee Peter Griffin doing, but wild times, man, the 60s. Anyway, please pause the video and listen to Fun 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 by the Beach Boys. Last trinket of information for you. In the wake of the surf craze, the electric guitar spawned its own craze, the electric guitar craze, that would dominate records for the next 2 decades. The electric guitar gained additional prominence during the spy craze. Political turmoil in the late 1950s and early 60s had entertainment consumers becoming obsessive over secret agents and espionage. Spy-themed television and film soundtracks were dominated by a fusion of electric guitar and orchestra. The fusion can be heard on film soundtracks from Peter Gunn to Dr. No, and on television soundtracks from Get Smart to The Man from U.N.C.L.E. We're going to go out on the James Bond theme from the original James Bond flick, Dr. No. Hope that this overview has been informative. The next video that you'll want to check out in the chronology of music history will be about the British invasion until MTV. So the Beatles are coming next. See you next time.